Welcome to Building Worldviews, the Praxis Circle podcast, where we hear from experts to help you build your worldview. I'm your host, May Lily Lee. These podcasts originate from video interviews you can find on our website, praxiscircle.com. Become a member by registering at the website and subscribe or follow this podcast so you can get updates on our latest releases. In this third and final installment, Doug Monroe talks with Sir Roger Scruton, philosopher, writer, composer, and educator. They discuss the uniqueness of America's political system with a commentary on populism. From philosophy to the sacred to politics, stay tuned until the very end when Sir Roger offers an answer to the question, are you optimistic or pessimistic about America? Let's listen.
You all right?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Good? Okay. Why does the West have a much higher interest in freedom or liberty than any other part of the world?
Well, I think we're really talking about the legacy of Christianity rather than just the West. That the sanctity of the individual is embedded in the Christian way of life, in the parable of the Good Samaritan, in the whole ethos of humility and respect for the other. You know, I think it just follows from all that.
Good answer. The existence of something beyond individuals that may exist, called the general will or group souls or Jungian group consciousness. I had a link in my first set of questions to an article in National Geographic where a psychiatrist or psychologist was saying there is a thing out there that we can dedicate ourselves to that,
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and people put that on Kant too,
yes.
with the absolute spirit. And
There are collectivities as well as individuals. And one of the big questions is, are collectivities just the sum of the individuals, or are they something over and above the individuals that compose them? That's a real question. I think it rather depends. But when people get together to form a school or a university or something like that, at first there's just that group of people. But over the years, and after perhaps 300 years, there's something else, which has an identity greater than the sum of its parts, partly because it unites people who've gone and people who've yet to come. It's a kind of relationship between the dead, the unborn, and the living, and it creates obligations of its own. It starts to have a personality of its own. In that respect, our societies are absolutely full of these corporate beings which are not identical with their members. They've risen above their members, so to speak, to take on a life of their own. There's nothing mysterious about that. I think it happens all the time. And the more it happens, the better, in a way. A partnership among thieves to achieve a certain goal and then distribute the profits and run, that does not create a corporation of this kind. But a peaceful, respectful community of people with a goal that they share and that which they pass on from generation to generation, that does create such a community.
beautiful. Okay. Now this is a little bit outside your area of philosophy, but this is a question that interests regular people. You can relate it to the resurrection or any number of miracles in the Bible, but these things come up in everyday, ordinary lives all the time. So the question is there a real spiritual world, in your opinion, as a regular person, ghosts, angels, something beyond what we sense, almost another sense we may have, or encounters?
my own feeling is that well, there's no need to assume the existence of this spiritual world in order to understand the spiritual nature of actual human beings. And there is a danger in spiritualism as well, in thinking that these ghostly entities are more important than the people you really owe your obligations to, and you start filling the world with fears, the ghosts that are by no means sympathetic and all the rest. I think it's better to avoid all that.
The only problem is they seem to pop up all the time.
Well, yeah.
In people's regular lives. So that's just an aside.
Americans are very, you have a ghost-haunted culture, and you don't. That's why you celebrate Halloween. Nobody else does.
Well, no, I'm talking about seeing actual two people seeing the same thing.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. So,
there is lot, but it's still, But you also have you have one of, I suppose, the only great writer who has written ghost stories, which is Henry James. But all your literature is full of ghosts. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that America, when you first, it's a recently settled country, and in their heart of hearts, Americans are aware of the fact that they've chased people out of this country, and that country is still haunted by those people, and their own predecessors as well in that.
Well, I'm personally interested. I'm not a spiritualist or anything like that. I'm close to what you are, but say, for example, the Harvard neurologist who was dead for a week, and he looks at his data and he says, I was actually dead. Right. And yet he comes back to life, and he tells these stories, and he learns things he could never have known unless he got it from someone else.
Well,
there are just a lot of examples.
There are all kinds of experiences like
ghost.
that. How to explain them, we can't necessarily explain them.
No. Where does the philosopher's appeal to the heart, passion, emotions, and feelings come from in your writings? I'd say over 50% of your writing is about aesthetics. How does that relate to, for the average person, how does art and music relate to your philosophy?
Well, I'm more like a French philosopher than an English one, in one respect, namely that I see philosophy as continuous with artistic enterprises, literature, music, painting, etc. And I see that one of the tests of philosophy is to make sense of all that, because here is these incredible activities that fill our world with meaning. Shouldn't the philosopher be able to say something about them? So I've spent my specialism in philosophy has always been worrying about art and literature and music, but I've also spent a lot of my time writing in that vein, writing fiction and similar things, and even writing music. So to me, these are intimately connected, philosophy with the world of the imagination, and this has serious a serious impact on my style. This is one reason when I write philosophy, it isn't a cold, abstract idiom that I use. There's always quite a lot of emotion of a kind that a literary writer would use.
I didn't appreciate this till a couple of years ago, but I don't think people can understand you unless they understand that side. And especially after hearing a whole week of it,
yes.
I don't think they can.
Yes, I'm sure you're right.
Okay. So this is you touched on this question before, but I think it's an important one, where you're being honest and people want to hear another answer, where you say that you are perhaps pessimistic that conservatism can quote-unquote win, or at least achieve majority status. And so the follow-on statement is it because of our nature, or is it because of a failed argument, or what? Why are you pessimistic?
Well, no, I'm pessimistic that conservatism can win in the world of ideas, because the world of ideas is dominated by the left and by forms of thinking that the left have inherited and made their own. But the mass of ordinary people, thank heavens, are incapable of thinking, so that they're not influenced by the world of ideas anyway. And there, I think conservatism has a better chance than liberalism on the whole. But there is the question of the intellectual world where I live, in which I move. There, I'm constantly aware that I'm alone.
You need to move back to the United States, but okay.
Well, yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. All right. This is a good question. To what extent is worldview or even philosophy based on gender? And that's where I said that I think a lot of the guys I know, I would say they're more motivated by women than anything all their lives.
Yes. Well, yeah, I see what you're getting at. I mean, philosophers are human beings, just like poets and musicians and carpenters, and as such, they're motivated by sexual feeling. The real question is, to what extent does that sexual feeling enter their philosophy, as it clearly enters the poetry of a poet or the music of a musician? And I think this is an interesting question. Sexual feeling is inherently lyrical, and so lends itself to artistic expression, but it's not inherently philosophical. So there is something odd about thinking that it enters into the philosophical way of thinking at all. And of course, in the past, there were not many women philosophers. But in my replies to Plato, which are called Xanthippic dialogues, I invent those women philosophers because I was conscious of the fact that the feminine as such is absent from most of the Platonic dialogues, and it ought to be put back. But, so, of course, Plato was homosexual, and there was no evidence that he really wanted those women back, would have wanted those women in his dialogues anyway. But anyway, that's a thought. Maybe one should be thinking more about how to put the feminine back into philosophy. Many of our leading philosophers today in the academic world are women. In America, you've got people like Martha Nussbaum, who've made quite a reputation for themselves, Christine Korsgaard and so on, very much in the academic mould, but still no more academic than the men. So perhaps we're now moving into a more gender-free kind of philosophy anyway.
What do you think of Anthony Eastland's theory that the world has a choice between patriarchy and murderous, chaotic nihilism because only men can control men?
Well, it seems, how would I say, it's somewhat extreme, isn't it? I mean, there's it sounds like he's had a lot of nightmares lately. I think only men can control men on the battlefield. That's true. But it's not only men who can organize meetings or control men in the political arena. We've never been better led than by Mrs. Thatcher. maybe, how can one generalize about this anyway? I think men are dangerous, and there has been a kind of not exactly a conspiracy, but an organized attempt to emasculate them, and they suffer from it. And that, I mentioned this in my book, The Disappeared. One of the characters of which is somebody who feels he's been emasculated, and identifies himself as an incomplete man, but has found release in heavy metal, and that kind of way of projecting himself to become a man again.
The issues surrounding what I call baby manufacturing, but the genome, human cloning, and baby manufacture could dwarf abortion and gay marriage and all that, and I think it will in my lifetime. Could this be as serious an issue for people as the bomb, say?
Yes, I think all these ways in which people are now beginning to interfere with human destiny are obviously potentially very dangerous, because they threaten to bring about a new kind of human being whose nature we don't understand and for whom we would feel no sympathy, nor it for us. So we might end up filling the world with our enemies, and they would be implacable enemies, much better equipped than us, because they've been made to be. So one has to be afraid of this, and the warnings given to us by Aldous Huxley and George Orwell ought to be listened to, but so far they haven't been.
You should write a book about that, but I think it would be far too Hollywood for you.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, we're in America now, and these are kind of fun, easy questions to finish up on. This one about, please comment on the Trump phenomenon, as well as I loved your comment in the National Review about populism. What is populism? And you say it's what the left calls those that disagree with them. I think that has a lot of meaning.
Yes, we obviously the election of President Trump and the Brexit vote in Britain and the turmoil in Europe over immigration and all the rest has led to a new kind of politics, and has been a surprise, and also a kind of offence to people on the left. They feel that that people have turned against them. People have become another kind of thing, and in order to describe this, they've coined the word populism to denote people who disagree with them. That's to say, people who actually are prepared not just to vote against their candidates, but to hope for a way of life which liberals can no longer control. And this is the sort of thing that certainly has been happening in America. And then, then of course, the leaders that they vote for are often, well, in America, of course, they're a very special kind of leader. Trump is not a member of the political class. He's a man with manifest defects of a kind that nobody needs to puzzle over, but also nevertheless captures the heart of many Americans, because he seems to identify with their condition, and their condition is of people who've been essentially betrayed by the liberal establishment, the people whom they thought they had the responsibility of protecting their interests, but have not protected their interests, particularly in matters like immigration, have surrendered the country to those who don't belong to it. That's the basic accusation that everybody makes against the liberal establishment, and that's true in Britain and in Europe, and that's what people feel. And they're right to feel this because that's what liberals do. They do it out of the best of motives, but only by way of showing that the best of motives are also the worst.
What is the proper role of America and its closest allies, number one being Great Britain, in the world now? What is the role? And I framed this question in the Huntington clash of you know, what is our role in this world of clashing?
The role of alliances is to protect each other's interests. And the best alliances are those in which the interests are shared. And the Anglo-American alliance has, for the last 100 years, been such an alliance. You know, that Americans have recognized that they do have, it is in their interest that Britain exists. It is in their interest that there is transatlantic trade and communication, that they need to be in touch with the old world, and that things happening in the old world don't threaten America directly, but indirectly do threaten America. So this is a very powerful alliance, because clearly we depend upon the American input. We wouldn't survive without that alliance. And it's absolutely clear now that if that alliance ceased to exist, Putin would take control of Europe. And the Germans, of course, because they're living in a cloud cuckoo land, they're living in a world of totally impenetrable illusion due to their own sense of unmanageable guilt, they will surrender to Russia. So it's almost necessary now for us to put the transatlantic alliance at the top of the political agenda. Difficult, of course, given your president, who has protectionist sympathies, isolationist sympathies, and is fed up with the way in which European powers depend upon the American taxpayer for their defense, quite rightly.
Wow, that's a good answer. Okay, this is we're turning to the last page, but comments on the future of Brexit in the EU. And I want to explain this. We have, in our website, we're trying to focus somewhat on America. Whither America? Does it create its own thing, or does it move more to a European model, even more of a welfare state, than we have now? And that we're really debating this, and I think it's what's tearing us apart. So I'm trying to build up clips about this. So comments about the future of Brexit in the EU. That's related, obviously.
We think, the British people, that we have voted for Brexit, but the elite does not, or the old elite, does not accept that vote. That is undeniably true. Many of them are trying to undo it, which would, if we voted again, I'm sure it would be the same result. But nevertheless, it has left us in a state of stagnation, because the people are pushing one way, the political class the other way, and people are bewildered. They've always thought that it's the duty of the government to take charge of their vote. Now they have a political apparatus which doesn't want to respond to that duty. Meanwhile, the European Union is supposed to be negotiating our exit, but and we are supposed to be negotiating with them. And all the evidence of the last 60 years is that the European Union is incapable of negotiating anything, because it was all built in from the first, the basic principles. We're asking them to revise one of those principles. They can't. Even if they wanted to, they'd have to get 29 signatures, or 27 signatures rather, to the result, which is impossible. So the whole thing is a complete fiction. that we're negotiating our exit. There won't be a deal. We will have to leave and then depend upon the World Trade Organization to maintain our relations with our trading partners, just as America does. And that would be fine as long as your president doesn't then set out to destroy the WTO, which he might very well do. So that's, as for Europe, the European model of the welfare state is one that we've all adopted in Europe one way or another. And America has actually joined in, and under Barack Obama, it was complete, really. And in fact, there's more of a welfare state in America in many ways than there is in Europe. And taxation is higher for people of my class than it is in Europe. So I don't think there is much difference anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's a question that a lot of people don't understand in America. We have certain images of various countries, and yet we need to improve our factual knowledge of what actually exists.
Yes.
Okay, so this should be a fun one for you. How did it feel and what it was like being knighted by the Queen? Americans are going to want to love you.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I was knighted by the Prince of Wales, who lives near here, actually. That was perfectly agreeable ceremony, of course, and everything went nicely. But the surprise was not the fact that I was, had that sword put on my shoulders, but the fact that someone in government had said yes to it, because I'm a troublemaker, and it's you'd normally expect someone like me to be excluded, as I have been for most of my life, from any of those sort of things. So it was somebody high up must have been reading one of my books and agreeing with it, or whatever. But there we are. It was a surprise, but very naturally it's very pleasing, because it makes you makes you invulnerable in some ways.
Do you get a letter that you drop your jaw on, or do you get a phone call, or what?
I got a little letter from the Cabinet Office. Nothing, it's very totally unfussy, all these things.
That's because that's the way Brits are.
Yeah.
But that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you about Scrutopia. I'm just going to assist in that effort. So let's go to a kind of a serious question. Two more. What's been most important to you in your life now and looking backwards? What are the most important things to you in your life now and looking?
When I look back at my life, I think the most important things, apart from marriage and children and so on, the most important things was my education at the grammar school and all that gave to me, and the discovery of music and literature in my teenage years. To discover them then, so as to have a vocation, that was wonderful. That's just kept me going through everything. The other most important thing, I suppose, was the discovery or the experience of communism in traveling in Eastern Europe and joining in the underground resistance to it. That changed my worldview completely.
I understand that. I've done a lot of reading in that area, and we've forgotten that already.
Yeah,
I don't know. We've totally forgotten it. Last question, and you'd be surprised how people come out on this. Some people are positive when you think they'd be negative, and vice versa. Are you optimistic? You're going to want to redefine the question, but are you optimistic or pessimistic about America?
I think if one were pessimistic about America, one would have to be pessimistic about everywhere, because America is the place above all others where enterprise and initiative are rewarded. if they're not going to be rewarded there, they won't, they're certainly not going to appear elsewhere, so nothing new and good will happen. They'll just be the old power structures getting more and more static and arthritic, as in China, and the world will be a vastly less interesting place than it is.
Fantastic. Thank you, Roger, for this opportunity for us.
Thank you.
Sir Roger Scruton passed away in January 2020 after a battle with cancer. Praxis Circle is fortunate to have had the opportunity to garner his thoughts and insight. A number of people after his death called him the greatest conservative philosopher since Edmund Burke. We hope Sir Roger's ideas have helped you as you build your worldview. Thank you for joining us, and subscribe or follow us anywhere you listen to podcasts, and visit us at praxiscircle.com. You've been listening to Building Worldviews.